Reading journal number 4, The Impact of Wilderness Tourism. The market for tourism in remote areas is booming as never before. Countries all across the world are actively promoting their wilderness regions such as mountains, Arctic lands, deserts, small islands, and wetlands to high spending tourists. The attraction of these areas is obvious by definition. Wilderness tourism requires little or no initial investment. But that does not mean there is no cause, as the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development recognized. These regions are fragile, i.e., highly vulnerable to abnormal pressures, not in just terms of their ecology, but also in terms of their culture, of their inhabitants, the three most significant types of fragile environment in these respects, and also in terms of the proportion of Earth's surface they cover are deserts, mountains, and Arctic areas. An important characteristic is marked seasonality, with harsh conditions prevailing for many months each year. Consequently, most human activities, including tourism, are limited to quite early defined parts of the year. Tourists are drawn to these regions by their natural landscape beauty and the unique culture of their indigenous people, and poor governance in these isolated areas have welcomed a new breed of adventure tourists, grateful for the hard currency they bring. For several years now, tourism has been the prime source of foreign exchange in Nepal and Bhutan. Tourism is also a key element in economies of Arctic zones such as Lapland and Alaska, and desert areas such as Ayers Rock in Australia and Arizona's Monument Valley. One location is established as a mountain tourist destination. The effects on local community are profound. When hill farmers, for example, can make more money in a few weeks working as porters for forage trekkers than they can in a year working in their fields, it is not surprising that many of them give up their farm work, which is thus left to other members of the family. In some hill regions, this has led to serious decline in farm output and a change in local diet, because there is insufficient labor to maintain terraces and irrigation systems and tend to crops. The result has been that many people in these regions have turned to outside supplies of rice and other foods. In Arctic and desert societies, year-round survival has traditionally depended on hunting animals and fish collecting and collecting food over a relatively short season. However, some inhabitants become involved in tourism. They no longer have time to collect wild food. This has led to increasing dependence on bought food in stores. Tourism is not always the culprit behind these such changes. All kinds of wage labor or government handouts tend to undermine traditional survival systems. Whatever the cause, the dilemma is always the same. What happens in these new external sources to income dry up? The physical impact of visitors is another serious problem associated with the growth in adventure tourism. Much attention has focused on erosion along major trails, but perhaps more important and there are the deforestation impacts on water supplies arising from the need to provide tourists with cooked food and hot showers. In both mountains and deserts, slow growing trees are often the main source of fuel, and water supplies may be limited or vulnerable to degradation through heavy use. Stories about the problems of tourism have become legion in the last few years, yet it does not have to be the problem. Although tourism inevitably affects the region in which it takes the place, the cost of these fragile environments and their local culture can be minimized. Indeed, it can be a vehicle for reinvigorating local cultures, and has happened with the Sherpas in the Paul Khumbu valleys and some alpine villages. And a growing number of venture tourism operators are trying to ensure that their activities benefit the local population and environment over the long term. In Swift Alps, community had decided that their future depends on integrating tourism and more effectively with the local economy. The local concern about the rising number of second home developments in Swiss pays the Enout results in limits being imposed on their growth. There has been a resonance in communal cheese production in the area, providing locals with a reliable source of income that does not depend on outside. Many of the Arctic tourist destinations have been exploited by outside companies who employ transient workers and trade also the profits of their home base. But some Arctic communities are now opening tour business themselves, thereby ensuring that the benefits occur locally. For instance, a native corporation in Alaska employing local people is running an running air tour from Anchorage to Kotzebue, where tourists eat Arctic food, walk on the tundra, and watch local music and dancers. Native people in the desert region of America's Southwest have followed similar strategies, encouraging tourists to visit their pueblos and the reservation to purchase highly crafted hand artwork. The Acoma and San Ildefonso Pueblos have established highly profitable pottery business, while the Navajo and Hopi groups have been similarly successful with jewelry. Too many people living in fragile environments have lost control over their economies, their culture, and the environment when tourism has penetrated their homelands. Merely restricting tourism cannot be a solution to the imbalance because people desire to see new places will not just disappear. Instead, communities in fragile environments must achieve greater control over tourism ventures in their regions in order to balance their needs and aspirations with the demand of tourism. A growing number of communities are demonstrating that with firm communal decision making, this is possible. The critical question is now that whether this can become the norm rather than the exception.